The Dallas courtroom buzzed with a restless energy, the kind that crackles before a storm breaks. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett stood at the plaintiff's table, her posture rigid, eyes blazing like she was ready to burn the whole place down. Her tailored blazer did little to soften the fury radiating from her, a woman who'd clawed her way from Texas streets to Capitol Hill, only to find herself here, fighting a war she hadn't started. Across the room, Victor Slade, the media. Mogul, with a smirk sharp enough to cut glass, lounged in his chair, his expensive suit screaming untouchable. He'd aired an exposé on his network, branding Crockett a corrupt sellout who'd traded votes for cash. Lies, she'd screamed in a press conference, her voice cracking with rage. Now she was suing for defamation, determined to gut his empire. Presiding over this powder keg was Judge Amelia Hargrove, a woman whose reputation for crushing egos was as legendary as her gavel. Her silver hair was pulled back tight, her face a mask of stone as she surveyed the room from the bench. She didn't just command respect. She demanded it, and woe to anyone who forgot. The gallery was packed. Reporters, political junkies, and locals drawn by the promise of a spectacle. They weren't disappointed. "Ms. Crockett," Hargrove's voice sliced through the murmurs, cold and deliberate. "This is a courtroom, not a campaign rally. If you can't control your theatrics, I'll have you escorted out." Crockett's head snapped up, her lips curling into a defiant sneer. "Theatrics? I'm here fighting for my name, while that snake," she jabbed a finger toward Slade, who raised an eyebrow, unfazed, "spreads filth on national TV. You want decorum? Tell him to stop lying." The gallery gasped, a collective intake of breath. Hargrove's eyes narrowed, her fingers tightening around her gavel. "You will address this court with respect, Congresswoman, or you'll find yourself in a cell instead of a news cycle. Am I clear?" Crockett didn't flinch, her voice dropping to a venomous hiss. "Crystal. But don't act like you're above this, Judge. We all know Slade's got deep pockets and deeper influence. Wonder how far that reaches." The accusation hung in the air, sharp and dangerous. Hargrove's face didn't change, but a vein pulsed at her temple. "You're treading on thin ice," she said, each word a blade. "One more outburst and you're done. Now proceed with your opening statement, if you can manage it without insulting everyone in the room." Crockett's attorney, a wiry man with nervous eyes, leaned in, whispering urgently, but she waved him off. She stepped forward, her heels clicking on the polished floor, and faced the jury. "Victor Slade didn't just lie about me," she began, her voice steady but laced with fury. "He tried to bury me, called me a crook, a traitor, said I sold out my people for a briefcase of cash. I've spent my life fighting for justice, for folks who don't get a voice, and this man thinks he can tear that down with a slick edit and a primetime slot. He's not just attacking me, he's attacking everyone who believed in me." Her words landed like punches, the jury leaning forward, some nodding. Slade shifted in his seat, his smirk faltering for a split second. But Hargrove wasn't swayed. She leaned forward, her gaze locked on Crockett. "That's enough storytelling," she snapped. "Stick to the facts, or I'll strike every word you just said. This isn't your soapbox." Crockett spun toward the bench, her fists clenched. "Facts? You want facts? How about Slade's history of smearing anyone who threatens his bottom line? Or maybe the fact that you're sitting there acting like his personal gatekeeper?" The gallery erupted, whispers turning to shouts. Hargrove slammed her gavel, the sound cracking like thunder. "Order!" she bellowed, her voice drowning out the chaos. "Ms. Crockett, you are this close to contempt. Sit down or I'll have you removed." Crockett's chest heaved, her eyes locked with Hargrove's, two titans refusing to yield. For a moment it seemed she might push further, damn the consequences. But she stepped back, her jaw tight, and sank into her chair. The room held its breath, waiting for the next spark. Slade leaned back, his smirk returning, as if he'd already won. Hargrove adjusted her glasses, her voice icy. "Mr. Slade's counsel will present their opening. And Ms. Crockett, I suggest you use this time to remember where you are." The tension was suffocating, a coiled spring ready to snap. Crockett's hands gripped the table, her nails digging into the wood. This wasn't just a case, it was a battlefield, and she was surrounded. But she wasn't done fighting, not by a long shot. Slade's attorney, a slick man named Grayson with a voice like oil, rose to deliver his opening statement, but the air in the courtroom still crackled from Crockett's clash with Hargrove. Jasmine sat rigid, her eyes boring into Grayson as he painted her as a desperate politician grasping at straws. "Congresswoman Crockett's lawsuit is nothing but a tantrum," he drawled, "a distraction from the truth my client exposed. She's not a victim. She's a schemer who got caught." The jury shifted, some scribbling notes, others glancing at Crockett, whose face was a mask of barely contained rage. Hargrove watched it all, her expression unreadable, but her earlier threat of contempt hung over the room like a guillotine. Grayson finished, and Hargrove's gaze flicked to Crockett's attorney. "Your witness, Mr. Daniels. Let's hope your client can behave." The jab was sharp, and Daniels flinched, but Crockett's lips twitched into a bitter smile. She wasn't intimidated. She was seething. Daniels called Crockett to the stand, and she strode forward, her presence commanding despite the tension. "Congresswoman," he began, "tell us why you filed this lawsuit." Her voice was low, controlled, but every word dripped with venom. "Slade's lies cost me everything, my reputation, my trust with my constituents. He didn't just attack me, he attacked the people I serve. I'm here to take back what's mine." Grayson objected, calling her statement inflammatory, and Hargrove sustained it with a curt nod. "Keep it factual, Ms. Crockett," she said, her tone clipped. Crockett's eyes flashed. "Factual? Like how Slade's network never fact-checked their hit piece, or how they ignored evidence proving I never touched a dime." Hargrove's gavel cracked. "That's enough! You will answer questions, not make speeches." The judge's voice was a whip, but Crockett leaned forward, undeterred. "And you'll let me tell my side, or is this courtroom just Slade's studio with better lighting?" The gallery buzzed, a mix of gasps and stifled laughs. Hargrove's face reddened, her composure cracking. "You think you can run my court?" she snapped. "One more word and you're in cuffs. Test me." Crockett's attorney scrambled to redirect, but she ignored him, her voice rising. "I'm not scared of you, Judge. I've faced worse than your gavel. You want to talk respect? Respect the truth instead of shutting me down." The room exploded into chaos, reporters scribbling, spectators whispering. Hargrove slammed her gavel repeatedly, her voice booming. "Silence, Ms. Crockett, you are in contempt. Bailiff, prepare to remove her." Two uniformed officers stepped forward, but Crockett stood her ground, her chest heaving. "Go ahead, lock me up. It won't change the fact that Slade's a liar, and you're eating out of his hand." Daniels grabbed her arm, pleading, but she shook him off. Slade watched, his smirk now a full grin, as if he'd orchestrated the meltdown. But then Grayson stood, his voice smooth. "Your Honor, perhaps the Congresswoman needs a moment to collect herself. We wouldn't want her to sabotage her own case." The condescension was blatant, and Crockett's head whipped toward him. "Sabotage? You're the one peddling garbage, and this judge is lapping it up." Hargrove's eyes blazed. "That's it, you're done. Bailiff—" But before the officers could move, Daniels jumped up, his voice desperate. "Your Honor, please, a brief recess. My client is under immense pressure." Hargrove hesitated, her gaze locked on Crockett, who stared back unyielding. After a tense pause, she relented. 10 minutes. But Ms. Crockett, you're on a leash. One more stunt, and you're out." The courtroom emptied into the hall, the air thick with anticipation. Crockett stormed to a corner, Daniels trailing, his whispers frantic. "Jasmine, you're tanking us. Hargrove's ready to bury you." She spun on him, her voice a hiss. "Bury me? She's been gunning for me since we walked in. You didn't see her cozying up to Slade's team before the hearing?" "I did." Daniels paled. "You're saying she's compromised?" Crockett's laugh was bitter. "I'm saying she's got a reason to hate me, and it's not just my mouth." She glanced at the courtroom doors where Hargrove had disappeared. "I heard rumors. Slade's network funded her last judicial campaign. If that's true, she's not just a judge, she's his." Back inside, the recess ended, and Crockett returned to the stand, her defiance unshaken. Daniels asked about the exposé's impact, but Grayson's cross-examination was brutal. "Isn't it true," he pressed, "that you've dodged questions about your finances for years?" Crockett's jaw tightened. "I've been transparent. You're just recycling Slade's trash to see what sticks," Hargrove interjected, her voice icy. Answer the question, Congresswoman. Crockett's eyes locked on hers. I did. But you're not listening. Wonder why? The implication was clear, and Hargrove's knuckles whitened around her gavel. The courtroom braced. For the next blow, the tension a living thing coiling tighter. The courtroom was a pressure cooker, every eye glued to Jasmine Crockett on the witness stand, her defiance a beacon and a lightning rod. Judge Amelia Hargrove's gavel rested in her grip like a loaded weapon, her face a storm cloud as Crockett's last jab, implying bias tied to Slade, lingered in the air. The jury shifted uncomfortably, sensing the personal venom beneath the legal veneer. Victor Slade, seated with his attorney Grayson, watched with the smug calm of a man who knew the deck was stacked. But Crockett wasn't folding. Grayson resumed his cross-examination, his voice dripping with mockery. Congresswoman, you claim my client's exposé was false, yet you've provided no proof to counter it. Is that because there isn't any? Crockett leaned forward, her eyes blazing. Proof? I've got bank records, emails, witnesses, everything your client ignored because it didn't fit his narrative. You want to talk evidence? Let's talk about Slade's habit of buying silence, the gallery murmured, but Hargrove's voice cut through like a blade. Ms. Crockett, you will not slander the defendant in my courtroom. Answer the question or face consequences. Crockett's laugh was sharp, bitter. Consequences? You've been threatening me since I walked in, Judge. Why don't you ask Slade about his offshore accounts? Or is that too close to home? The waiter. Accusation was a grenade and the room detonated. Spectators gasped, reporters scribbled furiously, and Grayson shouted an objection. Hargrove's gavel slammed, her voice thunderous. Enough, Miss Crockett, you are out of line. One more accusation and I'll hold you in contempt for the duration of this trial. The bailiffs edged closer, hands on their belts, but Crockett didn't budge, her stare locked on Hargrove. You don't scare me, she said, her voice low, lethal. I've fought bigger bullies than you, and I'm still standing. Hargrove's face twisted, a flash of something personal breaking through her judicial mask. You think you're untouchable because you're on TV, she snapped. This is my courtroom and you will respect it or I'll drag you out myself. The threat was raw, unprofessional, and the jury exchanged stunned glances. Daniels, Crockett's attorney, leapt up. Your Honor, I request a sidebar. This is getting out of hand. But Hargrove ignored him, her focus on Crockett. No sidebar. Your client wants to play martyr? Let's see how far that gets her. Crockett stood, her voice rising, trembling with fury. Martyr! I'm fighting for my life while you sit there protecting a liar. What's Slade got on you, Judge? A donation, a favor, or is it personal? The room froze, the question a dagger. Hargrove's eyes widened, a flicker of guilt or rage, crossing her face before she masked it. Bailiff, she roared. Remove her now. The bailiffs lunged, but Crockett raised her hands, stepping back. Don't touch me, she hissed, her voice carrying a raw edge of pain. You want to silence me? Fine. But everyone here sees what's happening. You're not just a judge, you're a pawn. The gallery was chaos, shouts drowning out Daniel's pleas. Hargrove stood, her voice shaking with fury. You're done, Crockett. Contempt, effective immediately. Get her out. But before the bailiffs could grab her, a voice cut through, an older woman in the jury box, her face lined with resolve. Wait, she called, standing. She's got a right to speak. We're here for the truth, not a power trip. The room stilled. Even Hargrove, pausing, caught off guard. The juror's defiance sparked murmurs of agreement, and Crockett's eyes softened, a flicker of gratitude breaking through her anger. She'd reached someone, even if it cost her everything. Hargrove's jaw tightened, her authority rattled. Sit down, she barked at the juror, but her voice lacked its earlier steel. She turned to the bailiffs. Take Miss Crockett to holding. We'll resume after I restore order. As Crockett was led away, her head high, she glanced at the jury, her voice steady. Keep your eyes open, the truth's coming whether she likes it or not. The courtroom doors closed behind her, the silence deafening. Hargrove sank into her chair, her hands trembling slightly, betraying a crack in her armor. Slade whispered to Grayson, his expression unreadable, but the jury's unease was palpable. Daniels approached the bench, his voice low. Your Honor, "This is a miscarriage of justice. My client's been targeted." Hargrove's eyes flicked to him, cold but unsteady. "Your client targeted herself. We'll proceed without her. Call your next witness." Outside, in the holding cell, Crockett sat on a metal bench, her breathing uneven. The fire in her hadn't dimmed, but her eyes glistened with unshed tears. She'd pushed too far, and she knew it. But then she overheard a guard muttering about Hargrove, a rumor that the judge's late husband had been tangled in Slade's business deals years ago. It was a thread, thin but real. Crockett's jaw set. She wasn't out yet. The holding cell's fluorescent light buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on Jasmine Crockett's face as she sat, her mind racing. The guards' overheard whisper about Hargrove's late husband and Slade's business dealings was a spark. In the dark, a lead she couldn't ignore. She didn't have her phone or her team, but she had her wits, and they were sharper than ever. Back in the courtroom, the trial churned on without her, but the jury's unease and the jurors' bold outburst had shifted the atmosphere. Crockett's absence was a presence, her words echoing in the minds of those who'd witnessed her stand. In the courtroom, Daniels called a witness, a former aide who'd worked on Crockett's campaign, but his testimony was cautious, neutered by Grayson's relentless objections. Judge Hargrove sustained each one with mechanical precision, her face a fortress, though her earlier tremor betrayed her. The jury noticed, their glances darting between her and Slade, who sat with an air of quiet triumph. But the juror who'd spoken up, a retired teacher named Clara, scribbled notes, her lips pressed tight. She wasn't buying the polish of Slade's defense. Daniels, sweating under the pressure, slipped out during a brief recess to check on Crockett. He found her in the holding cell, her eyes fierce despite the exhaustion creeping in. "Jasmine, you've got to stop antagonizing her," he pleaded. "Hargrove's ready to throw the case out." Crockett's voice was steady, urgent. "She's not neutral, Paul. I heard something. Her husband was in bed with Slade's company before. He died. Dig into it. Now." Daniels hesitated, but her conviction was iron. He nodded, slipping away to make calls. Back in the courtroom, Grayson called a surprise witness, a disgruntled ex-staffer from Crockett's office, claiming she'd pressured him to funnel campaign funds. The testimony was damning, and the jury leaned in, some nodding. Hargrove's rulings grew sharper, her patience thinning as Daniels struggled to counter. But then Daniels' phone buzzed with a text from his paralegal. Documents linking Hargrove's late husband to Slade's media empire, buried in old financial records. It wasn't proof of corruption, but it was enough to raise questions. Daniels requested a sidebar, his voice low but firm. "Your Honor, we've uncovered information suggesting a conflict of interest. Your late husband's ties to the defendant's company could compromise your impartiality." Hargrove's eyes flashed, her voice a hiss. "You're reaching. Counselor, this is a stunt and I won't tolerate it." But the jury overheard, and Clara's pen froze, her gaze piercing. Grayson smirked, but Slade's fingers twitched, a tell. Hargrove denied the motion to recuse herself, but the seed was planted. She called for Crockett's return, her voice tight. "Let's see if the Congresswoman can behave." When Crockett re-entered, the room stilled. Her time in holding hadn't broken her. It had honed her. She took the stand, her posture defiant, but her tone measured. "I'm not here to play games," she said, addressing the jury. "Slade's story about me is a fabrication, and I've got proof." Daniels introduced the documents Crockett's team had rushed to court, bank records and emails, showing no trace of the alleged bribes, plus a whistleblower's affidavit exposing Slade's team for planting the story. The jury's attention locked on, and even Grayson's objections faltered. Crockett's voice grew stronger. "This isn't just about me. It's about what happens when power thinks it can crush truth. I won't let it." Hargrove's gavel hovered, but she didn't interrupt. Her eyes flicked to Slade, then back to Crockett, a flicker of doubt crossing her face. The evidence was solid, and the jury's mood was shifting. Clara's nod was subtle but clear. Grayson tried to spin it, accusing Crockett of forging documents, but his voice lacked its earlier swagger. Crockett seized the moment, her gaze locking on Hargrove. "You've got a choice, Judge. Let the truth breathe, or I keep protecting him. What's it gonna be? The room held its breath. Hargrove's jaw tightened, her silence deafening. She'd been cornered, not just by Crockett, but by her own conscience. The documents about her husband weren't public yet, but Daniels's threat to push further loomed. She leaned back, her voice low. Proceed, Miss Crockett. But what's your tone? It wasn't a surrender, but it was a crack in her armor. Crockett nodded, her eyes never leaving the jury. She'd turned the tide, but the war wasn't won. Slade's smirk was gone, replaced by a tense frown. The courtroom pulsed with anticipation, every word a step toward justice or ruin. The Dallas courtroom was a battlefield, its air thick with the weight of truth and defiance. Jasmine Crockett stood at the plaintiff's table, her evidence against Victor Slade laid bare. Bank records, emails, a whistleblower's affidavit, all dismantling his smear campaign. The jury, led by Clara's quiet resolve, hung on every word, their earlier doubts replaced by rapt attention. Judge Amelia Hargrove sat rigid, her gavel still, her earlier fire tempered by the documents hinting at her late husband's ties to Slade. The accusation of bias hadn't been proven, but it lingered, a shadow she couldn't shake. Slade's polished veneer cracked, his fingers drumming restlessly as Grayson scrambled to salvage their defense. Daniels, Crockett's attorney, signaled for her closing statement. She stepped forward, her presence electric, every ounce of her, fury and pain, channeled into purpose. "This case isn't just about me," she began, her voice steady but resonant, cutting through the room. "It's about what happens when someone like Victor Slade thinks he can buy your name, your truth, and walk away clean. He called me a crook, said I betrayed my people. But these documents, this evidence, they scream the truth. I'm clean. He's the one with dirt on his hands." She turned to the jury, her eyes locking with Clara's, then sweeping across the others. "You've seen the lies, you've heard the threats. I stood here, took every hit, because I believe in justice, not just for me, but for everyone who's ever been torn down by power. Slade's not untouchable. Not today." Her voice cracked, not from weakness, but from the raw weight of her fight. A juror wiped her eyes, and even Grayson's pen stilled. Crockett faced Hargrove, her tone sharp, but controlled. "You tried to silence me, Judge. Maybe you had your reasons, maybe you didn't. But this isn't your courtroom anymore, it's theirs." She gestured to the jury, her words a challenge. Hargrove's lips parted, but no retort came. The room was hers. Grayson's closing was slick, accusing Crockett of theatrics, but it fell flat. The jury's faces were stone, their trust in Slade eroded. Hargrove instructed them to deliberate, her voice clipped, her eyes avoiding Crockett. As the jury filed out, Slade leaned to Grayson, his whisper harsh, but Crockett caught his glance. Fear, not arrogance. She'd rattled him. The weight was agonizing. The courtroom hushed as hours ticked by. Crockett sat, her hands clasped, Daniels murmuring encouragement. Hargrove stared at her bench, her fingers tracing the gavel's edge, her thoughts unreadable. Finally the jury returned, Clara at the forefront. The foreman stood, his voice clear. "We find in favor of the plaintiff, Jasmine Crockett. Damages awarded $10 million. The gallery erupted, cheers mixing with gasps. Slade's face drained of color, his empire's armor cracked. Grayson's objections were drowned. Out, and Hargrove's gavel fell weakly. Her authority diminished. Crockett exhaled, her shoulders sagging, not in defeat, but in release. Daniels gripped her arm, his smile wide, but her eyes were on the jury, gratitude shining through. Hargrove cleared her throat, her voice low. "Congresswoman, your conduct tested this court, but the evidence spoke." She hesitated, then added softer, "I may have judged you harshly, that's on me." It wasn't an apology, but it was close, a concession from a woman who rarely bent. Crockett nodded, her jaw tight, accepting it without gloating. As the courtroom cleared, reporters swarmed, but Crockett pushed through, her focus on Clara, who waited by the exit. "Thank you," Crockett said, her voice thick. "You saw me." Clara smiled, her eyes warm. "We all did. Keep fighting." The words hit deep, a reminder of why she'd endured. Outside, the Texas sun blazed, and Crockett stepped into it, her head high. Slade's lies hadn't buried her. They'd forged her. The money was justice, but the victory was hers, hard-won and undeniable. She'd faced the fire, the judge, the mogul, and walked out whole. The crowd cheered her name, and for the first time that day she smiled, fierce and unbroken.